starting a new series on the show where we will be recapping each division's offseason and then giving our kind of loose predictions on what their season will look like, a ceiling, a floor, a breakout player, and whatnot. So we'll be going through that, starting with the NFC South, and these will be in the order of what we ranked these divisions. All of us had the NFC South at the bottom for obvious reasons. If you don't know what division that is the Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. God, that is such a division. We are going to go ahead and start at the bottom here. That's the division that exists. We're going to start with the Panthers here. I get my notes here on my phone. They traded cornerback, and they finished 2-15 last season at the bottom of the NFC South. They traded cornerback Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson and a 7th-round pick, giving Bryce Young, their quarterback they drafted first overall a couple years ago, giving him a #1 target that will hopefully give them a little bit of hope. They also traded Brian Burns to the New York Giants and a 5th-round pick in that as well for a 2nd-rounder, a 5th-rounder, and another 5th-rounder. So losing stuff on the defense. They then went on to draft Xavier Liggett out of South Carolina with the 32nd pick. They drafted Jonathan Brooks, Trevin Wallace. I'm not sure that's really anything important, but some nice pieces. Looks like Josh has something to say about that, so we'll see about that. Looking at the free agent signings, though, they also picked up the 5th-year option on J.C. Horn, a guy that I believe, if he's healthy, could be a nice cornerback in the NFL. They signed Jadeveon Clowney. That's really the main one. Robert Hunt, they got some guard depth with Robert Hunt. Damian Lewis got offensive tackle and Josh Nijman. So assembling an offensive line that can give Bryce Young time, I think that's the biggest thing. But Josh, Ben, what do you think?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay.
So first off, new head coach also.
Yeah.
Big
forgot
thing.
to mention that. That's a big thing.
Dave Canales has experience with smaller quarterbacks, also fixing quarterbacks. He fixed Geno Smith. He was a quarterback coach there, and then obviously he did really well with Baker Mayfield last year.
Yeah, some good context.
Yeah. However, you said not important draft pick, and you threw somebody kind of out there. Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas, was arguably the best running back in the draft.
Yeah,
so they
true.
finally have a running back. They got Xavier Liggett, which is nice. They added the depth and experience with the offensive line, which is much improved. However, I still don't see things going really well for them. I don't believe in Bryce Young. I am the definition of a Bryce Young hater. I think he's way too short and way too small to play in the NFL, but that's just me.
So are you?
Yes, you're right. And he's not. And he's like an inch taller than me, and I'm much fatter. So, but the added Jadeveon Clowney and Clavion Chason to replace Brian Burns is a little bit debatable. I mean, these guys keep bouncing around and everything else. I don't see a lot of love with this team, but I mean, it's the NFC South, so you never know.
Yeah.
Ben?
I mean, obviously it's going to be a rebuilding year for the Carolina Panthers. I feel like getting this coach, Dave Cannell's, huge pickup for the offense, especially with Bryce Young. Obviously, like you mentioned, Josh, he had success with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, but it'll be interesting to see how this offensive line does for this upcoming season. I mean, Bryce Young last year was sacked was the second sacked quarterback last season. So, it'll be interesting to see how this offensive line will come back much better for him for this upcoming season.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have their ceiling 5 to 6 wins. This is best case scenario here. Bryce Young thrives with a competent offensive line. He actually has time to throw the ball, make good decisions. Deontay Johnson jumps a tier in the wide receiver rankings. And the gain of identity, I think, will be a low-scoring, hard-fought win if they're going to get a win. At their floor, we're talking 0-17.
Oh, wow. Okay, they won at least 2 games last year, man.
At their floor, 0-17. This is worst-case scenario, classic Panthers. Bryce Young starts his Hall of Fame campaign as the worst #1 overall pick of all time.
Oh, boy.
I don't think this will
Russell
happen.
would like to talk to you.
That's an outstanding point. I forgot about him.
But
and I guess they won about 4 games.
All right, fair enough. For me, if we're doing ceiling floor, I'm just going to say where I can see in the division. It's plain and simple. It's the NFC South. My answer is going to be the same for everybody, so you can skip me. They can win it, or they could be in last.
They can't.
I have no dude.
They can't win it.
I don't know about that. They could win it. They could finish in last. That division is garbage. It doesn't matter. Ben.
Yeah, I feel like Panthers, they'll probably get like 3 or 4 wins this year. I mean, I'm not giving up on Bryce Young. I mean, he obviously had a rough
3 or 4 wins. You're giving up on Bryce Young. I'm throwing that out there now.
I
guys.
thought you were a guy that waited 3 years for a quarterback.
Yeah, you're not waiting 3 years if you're winning a total of 5 games in your career.
Yeah, but like I mentioned before, he was the second most sacked quarterback last season. And it'll be interesting to see, like I mentioned, what he can do in year 2. They added a lot of offense, especially that offensive line, and I'm interested to see how these new additions at receiver and things like that will be beneficial for Bryce Young in year 2.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about new additions. Let's talk about the team that stole the headlines of the offseason.
Both good and bad.
Both good and bad. The Atlanta Falcons. They went 7-10 last year. They have a new head coach in Raheem Morris. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Kyle Pitts was thanking everyone who complained who's been calling for Arthur Smith's head.
So a big change in the offensive scheme with Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Rondell Moore. Youth movement on defense with the draft picks of Braylon Trice and Rook Arroyo. 18th ranked defense last year. Everything is going to come down to their defense this year. You brought in Raheem Morris, who is obviously a defensive guy, so you want to see the improvement on the defense. But they also had the head scratcher of the freaking draft when they had Odunze sitting there to be able to pick to go with Pitts and to go with London, and they decided to go with Michael Penix. And I still don't understand that whole concept, and I'm not going to go into that discussion again.
No, that's a whole can of worms.
But I do like what Atlanta did, but the division's still garbage, so I don't know how to go with them. And their schedule's not the easiest, Ben.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just going back to the draft, I'm still confused why they picked up Michael Penix after they signed Kirk Cousins to that 4-year, $180 million deal. But yeah, it's a lot of people confused. A lot of people were angry about that, and I thought they would in that moment they would pick up an additional player that they desperately need to make that key adjustment heading into next season. Yeah. So, I mean, Cousins, he's obviously coming off his Achilles injury he sustained back in Minnesota, so it'll be interesting to see how he'll come back from that. But with Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Robinson, Pitts, London, I mean, he's got a great team around them, though, so who knows? This might be the team that Kirk Cousins has been looking for to try to make that next step and try to make it to the playoffs, because I have a feeling, who knows? Cousins, he might have been the biggest miss for the Falcons trying to make that deep run.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to talk about that pick for a second, you didn't even have to go for Odunze. No defensive player was drafted. And your defense isn't necessarily I think they got great players there. It's a matter of scheming. But anyways, talking about the Falcons here, I'm going to go ahead and start the ceiling and floor talk. I think they can go as far as the NFC Championship. In the best case scenario, and I'll put it this way, once you get to the NFC Championship, anything can happen. And what I see happening there, Kirk Cousins comes back. Kirk Cousins, right before that injury, was looking like nothing we had ever seen from him. Yep. And if he can come back and bring that level of play, I don't know with the injury and stuff. I get that's probably a big question, but I'm saying if he's playing like he was in the best case scenario, they can make it to the NFC Championship. Kyle Pitts and Drake London both break out, and also in the scenario, defense locks in. And also that wide receiver room is kind of an underrated one when you look around the league, if you ask me. On the floor, they're just chilling around 500. They underperform, they let teams stay in the games, and they just lose. So what do you guys got?
For me, I just think first, last, doesn't really matter. They could easily finish. If Kirk Cousins doesn't bounce back, you're starting Michael Penix. That dude's not ready from day one. So again, they could be in last place, pending what happens, and they also could be in first. NFC Championship is a wild take. I'm not even going to discuss that right now.
That's not a wild take.
Wild take. Go ahead, Ben.
I mean, in a way, I feel like the NFC Championship, there's potential there.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I have my concerns because dating back to Kirk Cousins' playoff history, only one win.
This is true.
Primetime Kirk.
But
all right then.
but before he sustained that Achilles injury in Minnesota, though, he put up impressive numbers.
I was very excited to see him maybe make it to the playoffs that year.
Yeah. So, but with him coming in, like I mentioned before, this might be the missing puzzle piece that the Falcons needed to put together in order to make that playoff push. I feel like arguably they're going to be the best team in the AFC or the NFC South.
Agreed.
So I feel like they potentially could win the South this year.
Yeah, I got them winning 10 games and a wild card exit.
I got them winning 9 games in the regular season.
Fair enough. All right, so moving on to the Saints.
Yep. So the Saints, they got their offensive lineman, Talise Fuge, linebacker Willie Gay Jr., cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama, and Chase Young. Coming into this season, I was hoping that they would try to protect Derek Carr more, especially with that new offensive lineman that I mentioned coming in. But one of my concerns was I feel like, in a way, the Saints are making a mistake by relying on Trevor Penning and Ryan Remzakek as the starting tackles for this upcoming season. I mean, Penning, he struggled. He's been struggling since being drafted in the 2022 first round. Oh, Ramczyk. And Ramczyk, he dealt with injuries as well. So, in a way, that's kind of my concern for the offensive line this upcoming season and trying to protect Derek Carr. What you guys' takes?
They just didn't really make any moves that moved the needle for me at all.
Right.
My ceiling, I have them as the first team in this current schedule of 17 games to finish at 500. It's impossible. They'll find a way because this is the just most average team I have seen across sports in my entire life. They'll win some games, they'll lose some games, and that is it. That's all I got. I don't. That's Just Josh, take it away, please.
Go ahead.
or Ben, if you got something to say, please.
Just real quick, Josh. It'll be interesting to see how this defense comes together too. I mean, you obviously got Chase Young going up with Cam Thomas and, like I mentioned before, Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. So, I'm excited to see what this defense can do, and who knows, they can be the difference makers.
If the Falcons have that defense, what do you think about that?
If they had that defense, they would be serious contenders in the NFC
There
South.
we go.
Yep.
I mean, they would be, but they don't have that defense. They don't have Marcus Lattimore. They don't have Kool-Aid. They don't have Chase Young, who I absolutely love this year, and they don't have Willie Gay Jr. I get you calling them average, and the average part is the offense. It's a questionable scheme with 3 different running backs that they're using. I don't know if they're going to go with Spencer Rattler being their future quarterback. They took a chance on him in the 4th round. There's some issues with him in the off field, not exactly being a great leader. But the wide receiver room is very questionable. You have Olave, and then you have some dude named A.T. Perry and Rashid Shaheed. They're both flyers, so I mean they're fast guys. But as you mentioned, if the O-line's not good, those guys can't get downfield. They can't throw it. 8-1 doesn't sound crazy. I mean, they are the definition of mediocre and everything else. So, like I said, first, last, it doesn't even matter. It's the NFC South. These teams aren't contenders.
I do want to jump in here really quick and say I have seen some news come out of New Orleans about Spencer Rattler performing really well at his mini camps over the summer. So that's something to think about if you're a Saints fan.
Okay.
I mean, he had all the talent in the world. He was literally the #1 prospect or recruit coming out of high school.
Correct.
However, when you don't work in the Lincoln Riley system, and then you have your head case issues where you're not exactly the best team leader, what's really going to happen?
Did he finish his career at South Carolina, or did he have to transfer again?
South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, he went from Oklahoma to South Carolina. But let's talk about the defending NFC South champions, Tampa Bay Bucks. No really major headlines this offseason. They just kind of retained their guys. They locked up Winfield. They locked up Mike Evans, smart move. And they paid
Here we go.
a 3-year contract for Baker Mayfield. I question that. I still question that. I don't know if I love it. I don't know if I hate it. I need to see it out of him again, if that makes sense. However, I do think the Bucks take a step back this year, losing Devin White and losing I had his name, Carlton Davis. So 2 key parts of their defense that they're losing. The step up will need to be off of Kelly-John Cansey. He was a rookie last year, only played in 10 games, but he was dominant if you go back and watch that Eagles game.
Yep.
Absolutely dominant. So, Colton?
Yeah, I like this team. I'm not a Baker hater. I loved to see him last year. He led that team to the NFL divisional game, or NFC, I mean, and dang near went in there and won the game against the Lions. I mean, it was a 50-50 game there for a while, and I think he's a quarterback that, as long as he stays healthy, will get you your team maybe not to their fullest potential, but much better than Spencer Rattler or
Definitely.
you know, Derek Carr even. Like, I think he does have this sort of aura about him. I didn't mean to say it like the TikTok trend, but he just has this aura about him that kind of makes everybody around you just have more fun playing the game. I mean, Mike Evans will have another great season.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucks, obviously they got Baker Mayfield. They obviously have Evans at wide receiver. But one of my concerns was going into the season was the departure of Dave Canales, as we mentioned before. He's going to Carolina. But a couple of stats I wanted to share. During Baker Mayfield's 2023 season under Dave Canales, he has a 64% complete percentage, a career best, 4,044 passing yards, career best, 28 pass touchdowns, a career best. So in a way, I am a little bit iffy on how that offense is going to perform without Canales calling the shots.
Honestly, that kind of slipped my mind, but that's a very valid point.
That's
like
a valid
when
point.
you lose the guy who was literally calling the plays, you don't know the new relationship that's going to come in with the new offense coordinator, because it is a new offensive coordinator that they got from the University of Kentucky, Liam Cohen, I believe it is. Cohen?
Yes.
Yeah, Kentucky. So it'll be interesting because his play calling did not go well last time he was in the NFL. But my question is, running it back, they didn't go out and get anybody big.
No.
Is this team good enough to compete in the NFC? Like,
I don't think so. I think they're good enough to, if Atlanta doesn't do as good as I think, to still win the division and sneak out a game against the team like they did last year. But yeah, I don't think they're anything more than that. But to be fair, I didn't expect them to give the Lions. I mean, you were there, or you weren't there.
Yeah,
but
I got you.
You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not the only one that saw them give the Lions, a team that I think is probably NFL, Super Bowl champion possibility this year. I don't know, but
so.
I would say for them, my prediction is probably about 7 wins, because they also have a very tough schedule. I think that's going to be their downfall, is that their schedule is one of the tougher schedules I saw, at least in this division. And I say about 7 wins for them. They're going to relinquish that champion over to the Falcons.
Fair enough. Ben.
Well, I guess I already gave away my next point.
So Ben, starting with you, what's your standings?
My standings for the NFC South are the Falcons, Bucks, Saints, and Panthers.
Golden?
I'm going the Falcons, Saints, only because of the schedule thing, and then the Buccaneers and the Panthers.
6 and
And
11.
a space between the third and the Panthers. Sorry.
6 and 11 Carolina Panthers will finish in last place.
Okay, glad we agree.
6 and 11 Tampa Bay Buccaneers will finish basically tied in last place.
I don't hate that take.
7 and 10 New Orleans Saints, close to what you were joking about, and the 8 and 9 Atlanta Falcons will win the NFC South. I'm telling you, a losing record. If anybody wins 9 games, they're definitely winning, just like they did last year.
Yeah,
but
I
it will
agree.
take 8 wins to win the NFC South this year.
Okay.
Just my hot take.
Makes sense.
No, I don't disagree with that. I just don't think that's what it's going to be.
See,
I just see the Falcons getting those 10 wins, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. So book those takes, and we'll bring them back in the middle of the season. Can't wait for me to get blasted about my Falcons to the NFC best case scenario take, but we'll just have to wait.